Hey everybody, Fetty here. A while back I did a video on how to build a jig that will let you cut a circle with your router. Now that jig that I built was pretty rudimentary and it wasn't really all that versatile, but that video has been viewed a number of times. So I've been thinking about it and trying to come up with a little better design that would build a better jig and be more functional, more versatile. And I think that I've come up with that. So I wanted to share it with you and show you how to build it. So let's get started. Now I'm going to build this out of a board. This is a piece of pine. It's 3/8 of an inch thick. It's 24 inches long and 7 1/4 inches wide. What it is a 1x8 off the shelf, and I've planed it down to 3/8 of an inch thick. You could probably use 1/2 inch. You could probably buy 1/2 inch off the shelf too, and 1/2 inch would probably work pretty good, but I believe the 3/8 is going to work a little bit better. Now I've drawn this jig up in CAD and SketchUp so that I could print out a pattern. I don't know if you can see that real good, but I've got a pattern of this jig right here. And I can use this pattern to be able to build this jig. Now I'll have a link in the description box of this video where you can go over to my website and read about this project and download this pattern so you can build it yourself. Now I've drawn this pattern up so that it will fit this trim router right here. It's a DeWalt DWP 611. And on here you can see where I've got the whole pattern for the base of this router. However, I don't think it's really all that important to go by this whole pattern if you have a different kind of router, because after the body of the jig is built, we can lay this trim router on there and be able to locate the holes that way. I also have a pattern drawn up for a Bosch Colt. I'd have more, but those are the two routers that I have, and that's what I drew up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of this spray adhesive right here. I'm going to spray it on this board and let it tack up for a few seconds, and then I'm going to lay my pattern on there. But before I do that, I'm going to take a strip of this painter's tape and I'm going to run it down the middle here because I don't want that part sprayed with glue right now. And it may not make sense to you right now, but it will in just a minute. And that'll do. Then I'm going to go ahead and put our pattern on here. And there's a pretty easy way to get this pattern back off here when we're done. A little mineral spirits will dissolve that glue right off. Okay. So now that I've got our pattern on here, what I want to do is be able to keep up with the center point in some of these circles and these radiuses here, because eventually this pattern is going to come off and I'm going to need to know where they are. You can see on my drawing I've got our center points marked. The way that I'm going to keep up with it is I'm going to use this little punch right here, and I'm just going to punch it. And I'm going to do it real good so that later on, when this little stencil's off here, I'll be able to find it. This one's really important. We're going to need that. This one right here we're going to need in a minute, because there's going to be a slot that goes right here. Down here on this end, at the end of that slot, there's another one. We'll punch it real good. And while I'm in here, I'm just going to go ahead and punch these for my router, and I'll show you how to do it for yours if yours is a little bit different. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my utility knife and I'm going to cut out this part where that slot goes. The reason I wanted the tape on there is because we're going to mill out this slot and this little pocket, and I just didn't really want to do it with the paper on there and have it tearing the paper apart. Probably wouldn't have mattered, but That's the reason that I did it that way. So let me go ahead and cut this out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this board over to the drill press, take a 1/4 inch drill bit, and drill a hole plumb through the board right here where I've got my holes marked. And what that'll do is it'll allow me to know where that slot begins and ends. And when that hole's in this board, I'll be able to take my router and just, put my 1/4 inch drill bit into that hole and know where to start and where to finish. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so now I'm going to cut a slot all the way through our board. I have a 1/4 inch router bit in the router. I've set up these little homemade guide rails so that I can just, push the router down through there. I want it to be straight and true, so I'm taking a little extra care to set me up a little system here that'll cut this thing really good. The way that I'm going to do it is I have this router sitting directly above that hole that we drilled a minute ago. So I'm going to turn the router on and lower it down through that hole. And then I'm going to probably make about 3 cuts until I cut all the way through. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so now I've made 2 cuts through here. I'm going to go ahead and make this last cut. So now that our slot is cut and we still have our little guide set up, I'm going to take this 1/2 inch router bit, put it in the router, and I'm going to cut another little pocket about 1/8 of an inch deep all the way down through here. So let me change that over and we'll do this. Okay, so that turned out really good. I cut that about 3/16 of an inch, and you can see our slot and our little pocket. And hopefully now this is going to start making some sense to you. I'm going to take one of these little sliding T-nuts, and that's going to ride in that slot, and there'll be a bolt coming up through it like that. Now I think what I'm going to do now is go ahead and take this over to the bandsaw and go ahead and cut out this template so that I can take the rest of this stencil off. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and admit and acknowledge right now that I'm not real good with a bandsaw, so don't be making fun of me. So now I'm just going to soak that template down with these mineral spirits, and that'll pull that template right off there. Okay, let me finish cleaning this up. We'll come back and keep going. So this thing's turning out really good. You can see right there where I punched the center mark on our holes. So what I'm going to do now is chuck this hole saw up in the drill press and drill out this big hole right in the middle. Okay, so we got our center hole drilled now, and this thing's starting to look pretty good. It's starting to look like a jig. What we have to do now is figure out how to attach our router to it and figure out our hole pattern. Now, like I said in the beginning, I used a template that was drawn up specifically for this router. But if you don't have that router, it's okay. What we have to do, about any router has a little base on it. And that's got to come off anyway. So we're going to take it off, and we're going to lay it up here on our jig and figure out our hole pattern. Okay, so I'm going to take this plate right here, and I'm going to lay it on our jig, and I'm going to use the hole in this plate to reference on the hole in our jig. I've got my square on here just so I can keep everything square and lined up. Going to reference those two holes. Now, like I said in the beginning, I've already marked my holes, but if I hadn't, what I'd do is I'd come in here with this punch, and I'd just go ahead and punch them down so I'd know where they go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with this 1/2 inch Forstner bit, and I'm going to bore down, I don't know, about 3/16 of an inch, however much it takes to be able to recess that mounting screw. And once I do that, I'm going to follow it up with a 1/4 inch drill bit and just drill that hole all the way through. So let's take this over to the drill press and do that. Okay, so we got our holes ready, and we're ready now to go ahead and attach this to our router. Now, one thing I didn't mention a minute ago, but it kind of goes without saying, when you're routling these holes out, you're doing it from the bottom. Now, I routed out a 1/2 inch pocket and a 1/4 inch hole. That is much bigger than we need for these little bitty screws here. But that's okay because it gives us a little bit of slop, so that if we didn't hit our holes just right, we got a little bit to work with. What I'm going to do, you may not be able to see this, but I've got a little bitty flat washer right here. And I'm going to put that flat washer in that hole to kind of keep from blowing that hole out when we tighten everything down. So now it's just a matter of getting her lined up real good right here. That actually lines up pretty good. Going ahead and running some screws down in it. Go down. Right up. There we go. Now that jig was a little bit, and it wasn't really all that functional. No. Now the tools that we're going to need for this project is a 1/2-inch drill bit, a couple of jack rocks down at the end of the street to keep people from driving by. Now I've drawn this pattern up, nope, and daggone it. There's a blooper, nothing's coming out. Maybe I ought to plug the router in. Okay, so we got it. Now one thing I didn't mention, okay, so now we got our, what we'll do, see this little base on here right here? God, this little base on here right here?